It was a baffling and honestly just a painful ordeal for Robert Bobby Curley, a 32-year-old electrician from Pennsylvania. In late 1990, just 2 months after getting married, he began to feel terribly sick. The symptoms were strange and agonizing. He felt this burning sensation in his hands and feet, a pain so intense it was difficult to walk or even hold things. His skin became inflamed and red, and then, well, his hair started falling out in clumps. Doctors were confused by the collection of symptoms, which seemed to come and go without any clear reason, leaving Bobby and his family searching for answers that just never came. For 11 long months, Bobby's health continued to decline in a painful and unpredictable cycle. He would be admitted to the hospital, seem to get a little better, and then be sent home, only for the debilitating symptoms to return with a vengeance. His condition worsened with each new wave of sickness. He experienced hallucinations and severe physical weakness. It was a living nightmare, a medical puzzle that no one could solve. The constant pain and uncertainty took a heavy toll on the young man, who was known for his energy and love of life, transforming him into a shadow of his former self. Finally, just before his death, a doctor ordered a toxicology test. The results came back with a shocking answer. Bobby's body was filled with extremely high levels of thallium. Thallium is a rare and highly toxic heavy metal, a substance so dangerous that it was banned from use in pesticides and rat poisons in the United States many years before. It is tasteless and odorless, making it a silent and deadly poison. On September 27, 1991, Bobby Curley died. The coroner officially ruled his death a homicide not from a disease but from deliberate thallium poisoning. The investigation into Bobby's murder began immediately, and the first logical place for detectives to look was his workplace. At the time he first fell ill, Bobby was part of a crew of electricians remodeling a chemistry laboratory at Wilkes University. The police discovered that the university did, in fact, have thallium stored on site for scientific purposes. This seemed like a promising lead. Detectives wondered if Bobby had been accidentally exposed to the chemical at the lab, or perhaps if one of his co-workers had poisoned him, maybe as a cruel prank that had gone horribly wrong. With the focus squarely on the university laboratory, investigators began to interview and test Bobby's co-workers. The theory of a workplace incident seemed strong, especially since Bobby was known to be a bit of a prankster himself. Could someone have been playing a joke on him, not realizing how lethal thallium truly was? The police questioned his fellow electricians extensively. They even administered polygraph tests or lie detector tests to several of them. A few of the men failed the tests, which created a cloud of suspicion over them and caused a lot of tension and fear within the small community. However, as the investigation continued, the workplace theory started to fall apart. The toxicology reports for all of Bobby's co-workers came back negative. None of them had any trace of thallium in their systems. This made it highly unlikely that there was an accidental exposure that affected only Bobby. Furthermore, while some co-workers had failed the polygraph tests, the police could not find a single piece of concrete evidence linking any of them to the poisoning. There was no clear motive, no confession, and no witnesses. The case hit a dead end, and Bobby's co-workers were eventually cleared of any involvement. With the workplace lead gone cold, investigators had to turn their attention elsewhere. Their focus slowly shifted to the person closest to Bobby, his wife Joanne Curley. Bobby and Joanne had only been married for about a year before he died. It was Joanne's second marriage. Her first husband had died years earlier in what was ruled an accident. Investigators noted the strange timing of Bobby's illness, which began just 2 months into their new marriage. While Joanne initially seemed like a grieving widow and even passed a polygraph test, some of her actions raised red flags for the detectives. Joanne's behavior in the days surrounding her husband's death was particularly unusual. On the very day Bobby died in the hospital, she was reportedly very insistent on getting the keys to his prized antique Cadillac. Her focus seemed to be on his possessions rather than his passing. The day after his death, a male friend was seen at her house, which investigators found odd for a woman who had just lost her husband. These strange actions, combined with the lack of other suspects, made police look much more closely at Joanne Curley and her past, wondering what secrets she might be hiding from them. The investigation needed a scientific breakthrough, and it came from a crucial piece of evidence: Bobby's thermos. He was known to carry a metal thermos with him to work every day, which Joanne would fill with iced tea for him. Forensic scientists carefully tested this thermos and found exactly what they were looking for. There were traces of thallium on the rim of the container. This discovery was incredibly important because it suggested the poison was being administered through his daily drink. It pointed the finger away from the workplace and directly towards his home, making Joanne an even stronger suspect in the case. In another strange twist, medical tests revealed that both Joanne and her young daughter from her first marriage also had thallium in their blood. At first, this seemed to confuse the case. Was someone trying to poison the entire family? However, the levels of thallium in Joanne and her daughter were elevated, but not lethal. Investigators later came to believe that Joanne had intentionally given her daughter, and possibly herself, small doses of the poison. They suspected she did this as a clever and cold-hearted tactic to make it look like they were all victims, a desperate attempt to deflect suspicion away from herself. The most groundbreaking moment in the case came years later, in 1994. A renowned forensic pathologist, Dr. Michael Bowden, suggested they exhume Bobby's body to perform a novel technique called segmental hair analysis. Because hair grows at a steady rate, different sections of a single hair strand can show what substances were in a person's body at different times. When they opened the casket, it was filled with water, but Bobby's hair was remarkably well preserved. Dr. Bowden carefully analyzed strands of Bobby's hair, cutting them into small segments to test for thallium. The results of the hair analysis were astonishing and provided a clear timeline of the crime. The analysis showed that Bobby had not been poisoned just once, but had been given at least 10 separate doses of thallium over many months. Most importantly, the tests proved that the very first dose was given to him about 3 months before he ever started working at the Wilkes University lab. This scientific evidence definitively exonerated his co-workers. It proved that the poisoning began at home, long before he had access to the chemicals at the university, creating an undeniable trail leading back to his wife. The scientific evidence was now overwhelming, but investigators still needed to find the source of the poison and establish a clear motive. By digging into Joanne's family history, they uncovered a chilling detail. Relatives told police that Joanne's deceased grandmother had kept a jar of white powder in her basement. This powder was an old rat poison that contained thallium. Although the jar itself was never found, multiple witnesses confirmed that it had existed. This provided a likely source for the murder weapon, a poison that Joanne could have easily accessed from her own family's home. The motive, as is often the case in such crimes, appeared to be money. Investigators discovered that Joanne stood to gain financially from her husband's death. Bobby had a life insurance policy and an annuity, and Joanne was the beneficiary. It seemed she had poisoned her husband slowly and methodically over many months, all for the purpose of inheriting his money. The final damning piece of evidence came from the second autopsy. A large amount of thallium was found in the undigested food in Bobby's stomach, meaning he had been poisoned in the hospital on the very night before he died. The only person who fed him that night was Joanne. Armed with the thermos evidence, the hair analysis timeline, and the clear financial motive, prosecutors finally charged Joanne Curley with first-degree murder in July 1997, nearly 6 years after Bobby's death. Faced with the cutting-edge scientific evidence that Dr. Bowden had uncovered, Joanne knew that a jury would likely find her guilty. The segmental hair analysis was a powerful new tool, and her defense attorneys knew it would be very difficult to challenge in court. Her chances of being acquitted were almost zero, and a conviction for first-degree murder could mean the death penalty. To avoid a trial and the possibility of a death sentence, Joanne Curley offered to confess. She made a deal with the prosecution, pleading guilty to the lesser charge of third-degree murder. In her confession, she finally admitted to repeatedly poisoning her husband over the course of their short marriage. The chilling case of Bobby Curley was finally closed, not just by police work, but by the undeniable power of forensic science. The careful analysis of a few strands of hair had unraveled a complex web of lies and exposed a cold-blooded killer, bringing justice for Bobby after so many years.